Hello, my name is Peter Milton and I am the developer of TimeChainage. This is part 1 of a 3-part tutorial on formatting a TimeChainage chart. Formatting a TimeChainage chart is an art in itself and justifies a bit of thought. This is because there is usually a lot of information that can be extracted from a TimeChainage, so making it as readable as possible is important. TimeChainage has a good blend of formatting options that are likely to cover your needs whilst also being straightforward to use. In TimeChainage there are 3 main areas of formatting: the chart, the title block and activity annotation. Options for displaying and formatting annotation are to be found in the annotation menu. There are a couple of videos dedicated to annotation available now, and more will be produced in the coming weeks. The formatting options for the title block are in the headers dialog, found in the format menu. The headers dialog is for formatting the title, legend, logo, schematic and version info. There will be a separate video on this dialog, so look out for it. Formatting options specific to the TimeChainage chart are in the chart setup dialog, and it is the chart setup that is the subject of this 3-part tutorial. Right, let's get started. I have a project open in TimeChainage that currently has no formatting for the chart. There are 2 ways to access the chart setup dialog. One way is via the format menu in the main form. The second way is from the print preview, and we will look at both methods. First, we will go to the format menu and select chart setup. As you can see, there are a lot of tabs, 12 in all, each tab covering a different aspect of formatting. If you have an older version of TimeChainage, and I am using version 8.6.3 here, the number of tabs will be different and you may have a few less options. Over the course of this tutorial, we will examine each tab in turn, and this video will look at the first 4 tabs. First, we will open the Axis tab. The Axis tab is for the time and chainage axis labels and tick marks. For time, you can format the left and right sides of the chart separately, and for distance, you can format the top and bottom of the chart separately. For the time options, you have a spacing, a position, and a label frequency and description type. Starting with the type, there are options to show daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly labels. For this example, we will select month and year for the left-hand side and quarter and year for the right-hand side. Tick marks are shown between each period, and you can choose whether to have the label on the tick marks or between them. I will select between the ticks for both sides of the chart. I will explain the spacing in a minute, but first let's look at the chainage labels. For the chainage labels, we can specify any spacing. Let's have 250 meters for the top labels and 1000 meters for the bottom labels. We will usually want to position the labels on the ticks. We then check the show box to display the labels. We can change the font of any label set, so let's do that. I'll press the font button on each set in turn, first being the left side time labels. For this example, I would change the size to 12 and the colour to teal, then press the OK button. I will then repeat for the right side time labels. Then for the top time chainage labels. Then finally for the bottom chainage labels. Let's see how that looks. We apply the format options by exiting the dialog. We do this by pressing the OK button. On the left hand side of the chart, we have labels showing the month and year. On the right hand side, the labels show quarter and year. And I have the labels in between the tick marks that separate the periods. The chainage labels are spaced at 250 meter intervals on the top and 1000 meter intervals on the bottom. The label fonts have not changed though. That will only be apparent in the print preview, which we will look at in a bit. We will first return to the chart setup dialog. We go to the Format menu and select Chart Setup. Returning to the time axis, if we put in a spacing of 2 for the left side, then the label will show every 2 months. If we put in a spacing of 2 for the right side, then the table will show every 2 quarters. In this case, it will read better if we put the labels on the ticks. Let's see how that looks by pressing the OK button. As you can see, we now have the month label shown every 2 months and the quarter labels every 2 quarters. And this time the labels are positioned on the tick marks. Let's return again to the chart setup. I will return the spacing to 1 and position the labels between the ticks again. Now let's add grids to the chart. We open the Grids tab, and as you might expect, we have a time grid and a chainage grid, and for each we can have major and minor grid line style and spacing options. For the time grid, we can space the grid lines at daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly or yearly intervals. Let's select yearly for the major grid and monthly for the minor grid. The spacing control works the same way as for the axis labels. We will keep the default value of 1. To select a line colour, just click on the colour box and a dialog opens. I will keep the default black for the major grid, but for this example I would change the minor grid to a teal colour. The line width is in pixels. I'll set the major grid to 2 and leave the minor grid at 1. For the chainage grid, we will have a spacing of 1000 meters for the major grid and 250 meters for the minor grid. We will set the minor grid color to teal to match the time grid. We will set the line width to be 2 for the major grid and leave it at 1 for the minor grid. We then check the show boxes. Now let's see what that looks like. We now have a time and chainage grid as well as labels. Let's return to the chart setup dialog. Now we will look at the background tab. Here we can set a chart border width and colour, and chart background colour or image, and have an axis colour. I'll do an example so you can see what it can look like. Let's set the border width to 25. In TimeChainage, whenever you see a colour box like this, you can select a colour by clicking on the box. A colour box will then open and we will select teal. For the chart colour, we will select a pale yellow. For the axis colour, we will select a pale blue. Let's see the result. All the main form shows is the chart background colour. To see the other settings, we must go to the print preview. We get there via the file menu and selecting the print preview. Now we can see that we have a teal chart border with a width of 25 and the axis labels are in a blue box. Also, we can now see that the axis labels are coloured teal and size 12. This doesn't look very good and I'm sure you can do much better. I just wanted to show you the options available. The colour options, however, do allow you to format the chart to match your company branding, for example, so it could be useful for presentation purposes. For this example, we will play a bit more. We can get to the chart setup dialog directly from the print preview by this button here. I will put the axis colour back to the default white. And let's add a picture for the background. To do this, we click on the import button and then navigate to where the image is stored. Then we select the image we want and note the image needs to be in a JPEG or Windows bitmap format. We then click open. Note that the image file name and location is shown. Then we click on show and exit the dialog. Because we entered the dialog from the print preview, when we close the dialog, we return to the print preview. This is a very useful feature. We now have the image we selected as the background. You're not likely to want the image in the background very often, but the feature is there if you want it. Let's return to the chart setup via the button here in Print Preview. I will turn off the background image for now by selecting the Hide option, and I will set the chart colour back to white. We will now look at the Holidays tab. You can display non-working time on the chart in the form of horizontal bands. First, you need to select which calendar to use. It only makes sense to show non-work time from one calendar, so if your project uses multiple calendars, you need to select the most appropriate one. For the layout I have open, I will select a 5-day week with site holidays. There are two options: Show Holidays and Show Weekly Non-Work Time. The Holidays option is for the non-work dates you added to the calendar. In this case, it is bank holidays plus a 2-week shutdown at Christmas. We will select this option. The weekly non-work time would be the standard non-working days of the week. For our 5-day week calendar, it is the weekends. For a chart that covers a period of over a year like our one, this would be a bit much, so we will not select this option. We can then select the colour of the holiday periods. Let's select teal to match our grids and border colour. There are then various fill styles to choose from. We will select diagonal cross. Finally, the position of the holiday periods can be behind the activity lines or in front of them. I will leave the option at behind. Let's see what this looks like. We now have all the holiday periods shown on the chart in teal coloured bands with our diagonal cross hatching. Let's exit the print preview. We can save the changes we make in the chart setup dialog in a layout. The layout we have open is called Full Project WBS Styles. To save the formatting options to this layout, we just press the Save Layout button on the toolbar. Well, that was a deep dive into the first 4 tabs of the chart setup dialog, and I think that is enough for this video. I don't want to make these videos too long. There will be 2 more videos that cover the remaining tabs in the chart setup, so look out for them. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful. TimeChainage, adding an extra dimension to your schedules.